the water explodes. A hippo's head breaks the surface, jaws thrown open wide, a bellow rolling across the river before the sound even reaches the shore. It sinks again, rises, shakes its massive skull side to side, water flying in every direction. And there, clinging to the folds behind its ear, something small holds on through all of it. A tick, one of dozens, buried in skin too thick for the hippo's own mouth to reach. From a dead tree on the riverbank, a small brown bird watches. Red beak, sharp eyes. It has been waiting for this exact moment. This is the red-billed oxpecker, and the animal it's about to land on kills more people in Africa every year than lions, leopards, and crocodiles combined. It lands anyway. The hippo doesn't flinch, doesn't turn, doesn't so much as blink. An animal that will crush a boat, snap a canoe in half, charge anything that enters its territory without warning, holds perfectly still for a bird that weighs less than a smartphone. This is the deal that keeps them both alive, and it's more complicated than it looks. The oxpecker moves fast, along the ridge of the ear, into the fold behind the jaw, down the thick, creased neck. Every few seconds, its beak finds another parasite and pulls it free. The hippo's eyes drift half shut. For a moment, the most dangerous animal on the continent looks almost peaceful. But peace here has limits. Hippos are not solitary. This pod holds a dozen animals, crowded together in a bend of the river where the water runs deep enough to submerge their entire bodies except the ridge of their backs. And where there are this many hippos, there is always a bull deciding who's in charge. He surfaces without warning near the edge of the pod, twice the size of the others, scarred along one flank from fights that happened seasons ago. His jaws open to their full, impossible width, a display meant for one purpose, reminding every other hippo in the water exactly what he's capable of. The oxpecker doesn't fly off, it simply repositions, hopping along the bull's spine as he lunges toward a younger male testing the boundary of his territory. 2 tons of muscle collide in the shallows. Water and mud erupt. For 3 full seconds, it is impossible to tell where one animal ends and the other begins. Then it's over. The younger bull retreats. The dominant male settles, breathing hard, and the oxpecker, which never left his back through any of it, goes right back to work on a tick near his shoulder. This is not a peaceful job. It is a job done in the middle of the most volatile animal in the river, and the bird has learned exactly how much space to give and when. The oxpecker carries one more skill that has nothing to do with parasites. Perched high on a hippo's back, it has a clear view across the riverbank that the hippo itself, low in the water, does not. When a crocodile drifts too close, or a lion moves through the reeds at the water's edge, the bird doesn't simply fly away to save itself. It screeches, a sharp, repeated alarm call that carries across the water. The hippos react instantly, submerging, turning toward the threat, gathering the pod tighter together. The bird that spends its mornings feeding off their blood spends its afternoons keeping them alive. Neither species asked for this arrangement. It simply became one of the more effective early warning systems in the entire river system, built entirely by accident, out of a bird's need to see danger before it needs to explain why. By mid-morning, more birds have joined. 2, then 3, spreading across different hippos in the pod, one working the ears of a mother with a calf pressed close to her side, another balanced on the back of a male half-submerged near the reeds. Each bird searching, pausing, striking, moving on. It is constant. It never really stops, because on an animal this size, there is always another tick, always another patch of skin the hippo itself cannot reach. The calf watches its mother's passenger with open curiosity, too young yet to understand what the bird is doing, only that it belongs there, that it has always belonged there in every generation of hippos this calf's mother has ever known. But here is where the story stops being simple. Scientists who've studied this relationship for years have found something the hippos themselves can't detect. The oxpecker doesn't only remove parasites. Sometimes, when a wound is healing on a hippo's hide, the bird will return to that same spot again and again. Not because ticks keep appearing there, but because the wound itself, kept open just slightly by the bird's beak, becomes a small source of blood. A meal that requires no searching at all. It isn't cruelty, it isn't betrayal, it's simply what happens when two species evolve to need each other, but not in exactly the way either one assumes. For the hippo, tolerating the bird is still worth it. A pod this size can carry thousands of ticks across a single dry season. Parasites that spread disease, drain blood, and weaken even an animal built like a tank. A few reopened wounds are a small price against that. For the oxpecker, the hippo isn't just a meal, it's a territory, a moving buffet that will return to this same stretch of river every day for years, giving the bird a food source no other animal in this ecosystem can offer in this volume. By early afternoon, the heat presses down on the river, and even the hippos grow quieter, sinking lower, conserving energy the way giants must in the hottest hours. The birds use this stillness differently. With less movement to track, they work even more precisely, covering ground they couldn't reach when their hosts were restless. One oxpecker discovers a wound along an older bull's flank, an old scar reopened during a fight days earlier. Instead of skin already healing clean, blood still rises faintly to the surface. The bird lingers there far longer than at any tick site nearby. 10 seconds, 20. The hippo doesn't react, doesn't seem to notice the difference between a parasite being removed and something else being taken. This is the imbalance the story rarely tells. The partnership looks equal from a distance. The giant tolerates. The bird cleans. The ledger appears to close evenly. Up close, it never quite does. Nature does not deal in fairness. It deals in what each species can get away with, and how much the other is willing to tolerate before the relationship stops being worth it. Near the far bank, a crocodile has been drifting closer for nearly an hour, barely a ripple marking its path through the water. It is patient in the way only a crocodile can be, angling toward the shallows where the mother and her calf have drifted slightly apart from the rest of the pod. The oxpecker on the mother's back sees it first, a shift in the water that doesn't match the current. The screech comes instantly, sharp and repeated. The mother's head snaps toward the sound, and in seconds she has pulled the calf against her flank, putting her own bulk between it and the water's edge. The crocodile, its approach discovered, sinks without a sound and drifts away to wait for an easier target elsewhere. The bird never stops watching. It simply returns to the tick behind her ear, as if nothing happened at all. As the sun drops lower, the light over the river turns the color of rust. The pod begins settling deeper into the water, only eyes and ears and the ridges of their backs still breaking the surface. The oxpeckers make their final passes, one last tick behind an ear, one last check along a scarred flank. Then, one by one, they lift off toward the trees to roost for the night, leaving the pod to the darkness and the sounds of the river settling into stillness. Tomorrow, the sun will rise over this same bend in the river. The hippos will surface, jaws wide, bellowing across the water the way they always do, and the birds will be waiting in the branches, ready to land on the back of the most dangerous animal in Africa, because after generations of this exact arrangement, both species have learned something simple. Survival here was never about trust. It was about need, and about knowing exactly how far that need can be pushed before it breaks, and how a bird small enough to fit in a human palm learned to make its home on the back of a giant that could end its life in half a second and never once chose to. If you want more stories about the strange, complicated bargains written into the wild, the partnerships that look peaceful on the surface and aren't quite what they seem underneath, subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.